If your child melts down at fractions, you're not alone. In fact, fractions are one of the most common triggers for math frustration. But here's the good news: the problem isn't your child, and it's not you either. It's the methodology and the way that they have been working with fractions. They develop what's called a whole number bias. And we'll get into that in ways that students or learners can overcome that bias so that they won't struggle with fractions anymore. Today, I'm going to show you why fractions feel so confusing to kids and three simple things you can do at home to help them finally understand it. No worksheets, please, no worksheets, especially with 20 to 40 questions. Good God, no. No drilling and killing, just even though there is a time and a place for drilling. However, it's not necessarily with a frustrated learner. Just real life tools that work for struggling learners. When you ask a child how old they are, they'll tell you one, two, three. They don't really start saying two and a half and three and a half off the bat, not unless not until they understand fractions. So learners have what is called a whole number bias. Kids naturally think in whole numbers, and as I've just called it, called a whole number bias. So when they see 1/8 versus 1/4, they're thinking of eighths. I know 8 is bigger than 4. Therefore, 1/8 must be bigger than 4. And it's intuitive from that logic. However, they have to, how should I put it? They have to learn how to deal with fractions and learn the rules of fractions by practice and utilization and recognizing that fractions are all around us. If your child has to share something, I promise you, especially if they have to share with a sibling, I understood. I had a sibling. I understood the concept of one half pretty quickly, especially if I had to share. If you have one sibling cut, like you may have heard this, have one sibling cut the piece of cake or piece of pie and the other sibling choose first, oh, you get very good at understanding what the concept of one half is. So doing things like that, if fractions only show up on worksheets, they're abstract. Their brain can't really picture it, can't really, doesn't have a really good grasp of it. But your child actually uses fractions every day. And as I said, they just don't realize it. And it's pointing out those instances which can make that light bulb go off and then be like, aha, yeah, I see. I have been using this a little bit more than I thought. Visuals are powerful. This is another strategy for neurodivergent learners, or really and truly a best practice for all learners. Struggling learners, especially those with ADHD, autistic, dyslexic, or even anxious students, they need to see the math. They need to be able to interact with it, to play with it, to have a good mental concept of it before they are sent off to do the more abstract stuff on paper, where they have to apply this knowledge to something that they have no idea about or in some other context. So using tools, fraction bars, number lines, candy, well, I try to dissuade using the sugar because, of course, these kids love sugar. I use fruit, even though that's still sugar, but by another name. I'll use time. I'll use games. We'll do stuff like that in order to make the fractions look real or bring the fractions to life, especially in the form of not just kinesthetic, but in the visualization of a fraction. Another powerful technique is to explain your thinking trick. So instead of correcting the wrong answer by saying like, "Oh, that's wrong," and then not going into what they did wrong, or just giving them the correct answer, ask them to explain their thinking. What got them to the point where they messed up or they went the wrong way? And often, sometimes when you tell a student they're wrong, they're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. They think all of it's wrong, and not all of their logic is wrong. It may just be one small step or one misconception. And that's a lot easier to fix than trying to fix a student who believes they did none of it right. So show me how you were thinking about this is a good question or a good discussion point, and you'll uncover the patterns causing the mistake, which is way more helpful than just fixing one problem. The last technique I'm going to go over in this video, low pressure practice that actually works, meaning having them slice up food, having them measure out stuff for recipes. Those are low pressure ways where it's like they can mess up, but then you can do it again. It's okay. Use time. We can do half of this. We can do half of this for 30 minutes or whatever, and we can do this for another 30 or a quarter of an hour. Using that in those kind of concepts. And we sometimes take for granted that we're doing it logically in our head, but they don't know that yet. We often, what should I say? We forget that we didn't know and that they don't know, and that it took a while for us to understand some of these general rules of communication when it comes to fractions and how we use them. So, yeah, give them those low pressure practice and be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Purposeful about how you give them opportunities to think about fractions in their day to day in things that they're doing, such as I said, measuring out or cutting food, or drawing instead of doing a worksheet where they're just looking at a fraction. So, if fractions have been a stress point in your home, I just want you to know that is more common than you think. I myself hated fractions and turned every fraction into a decimal for years until I couldn't anymore in the upper divisions of math. But it's not a reflection of your child's ability either. They just need a little bit of more support to get to that point where fractions don't feel overwhelming. If you like some extra support, I put together something called the Fraction Fix Boot Camp. It's a short, relaxed, confidence building series of lessons that help students finally make sense of fractions in a calm, visual way. So it's happening this week, and all the details are on my website. It's simply there if it feels like it's the right next step for your child. If you have any questions, or you can reach out anytime. I'm happy to help however I can. All right. Peace out.